I've gone live on Facebook, just so that you know.
Oh, okay.
Just so that I can, that's one less thing. Okay, very good. All right, so that.
Sending Pam Morris Walton through.
Okay. Pam Morris?
Yes, Santita. Good morning to you.
Good morning. I'm trying to do a little bit more housekeeping here. So I can speak with you in a minute, but I'm so glad that you're with us today and welcome home.
Thank you. Thank you. I can hear you both on Facebook.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And could you turn up, well, who do we have? I guess nothing. We have commercials right now. Okay. I always like to know that Pam, I always like to know that I'm on the air.
I understand.
You know? Oh.
Once I go to Disneyland now, so I'm Disney World and Disneyland crossed off, and hopefully make some more parks so I can go around everywhere and do a world tour.
You sound good.
Oh, thank you so much. It's wonderful hearing your voice. Oh,
Thank you.
wonderful, wonderful. And I'm glad you got away.
Yes. Look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Called an unidentified object. General Glenn Van Herk is with NORAD. China says the balloon shot down by the U.S. over the South Carolina coast was an unmanned airship made for meteorological research that had been blown off course. The flight crew urged
Parliament building ahead of a preliminary vote on a bill that would give politicians greater power over on the judicial overhaul proposed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government. Moldovan outlining what she says is Moscow's plan to overthrow Moldovan government and involve the use of external saboteurs. The great presidential office this year, the battle going on in the near possible presidential. Mexico State has called off the rest of its men's college basketball season after reviewing a police report that cited 3 players for false imprisonment, harassment, and criminal sexual contact against the teammates. Players quit following initial reports of the hazing incident at New Mexico State. And Donahue, AP News. 20 a.m. WPPT Wellsburg and streaming worldwide to WPPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now, your WPPT820 weather update.
Local Vegas Chicago weather update. Sunny skies here for today with a high of low 50s. Winds out west at 5 to 15 miles per hour, gusts in the high 20s. Tonight mostly clear and a low near 34. 5 p.m. today, a chance for rain showers late on the side, the high 52 degrees. And the potential function at 60, a high rock 52. Clouds high 36 degrees. From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Lucci. Currently, it's 37.
Cliff Decker. Oops. Make it again. Republican toilet. 70. Martin Taylor Report. Overlooked. Toilet. This is almost large design installed and coming out and speaking to each other about supporting Kevin McCarthy, March early, and the good talking to each other, and Marco Ruffalo, or him, and they start speaking each other. I think it's up to me, and it's almost Slavic, and it's coming from everyone. Who do you root for this one? It's like King Kong versus Godzilla. They go push each other, thank you. More evidence of Kevin McCarthy caught. Joke. Hear more from Glenn and heartlandcleanup.com and subscribe to the page. Hi, I'm Marcel These dogs will often take the same risk, make the same sacrifices as our human warriors, keep our troops safe from giving up bombs and IEDs, locating enemy positions,
Okay.
bringing simply comfort to home with almost unimaginable methods. Yet, we've raised the United States time. We're not always given the same treatment. That's possible. American EA wants to bring home out.
Okay. Pam, I was just trying to bring down a couple more pieces for me. It's always something. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I'm good. I'm good.
Because, you know, this is a news show. And so I'm always pulling some news stories. So there's that. Okay, so let me pull that. Okay. Last bit. Okay, great. All right. Whew. That. Okay. All right. Okay. Oh boy, Pam Morris. Oh, oh boy, thank you so much. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight. Oh Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Thank you so much, Pam. I thank God for you today. Thank you for everything. Just for being a wonderful example and just everything. Stand by. All right, coming in. Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Getting just a little bit of feedback. We're working that out. I'm so glad to be with you on the day after the Super Bowl. Kansas City was triumphant, but boy, oh boy, did Philly give them a run for their money. Patrick Mahomes is the MVP, but Jalen Hurts, and as Patrick Mahomes said he would have been the MVP had Philly been able to pull it out. They both had fantastic games. To me, it was a very exciting Super Bowl. And then Rihanna having a baby. Oh my gosh. I knew she wasn't doing a lot of moving, and I knew she looked a little full, but I said, she just had a baby. Wow, she's having another baby. Congratulations to her. What a wonderful, wonderful game. I am Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and of course, meet my morning stars. Oh boy, on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. You'll see Daryl and Angela and Mark and Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia. Girl, it's still beautiful. Still beautiful. You have a whole lot to celebrate. Jalen Hurts is young yet. Joyce Anderson, and oh boy, so many of you, Guy and Daryl, and so many others. I want you all to like and share the show. And if you want to hear the show without commercials, please go to WCPT820.com/Santita at the end of the show. So everybody, the Super Bowl, fantastic, probably the most watched television event in America. Out of the top 100 television shows in the United States, the 82 most watched television shows in America are actually sports events. That's right. So, I mean, it's big business. ESPN dwarfs all the networks. And boy, oh boy, last night did not disappoint. So let's get to it, everybody. It's going to be very warm in this part of the country, Minneapolis and Chicago. Chicago will be 48 degrees today and sunny. Minneapolis, 41 degrees today and sunny. Wow. Oh, woohoo. And tonight, the NBA, The Timberwolves will be hosting the Mavericks, and the Magic will be here in Chicago with the Bulls. And in the NHL, the Panthers will be playing the Wild. And you know what? We're going to be talking about Ukraine. What's going on? Why is it now that we're beginning to hear about the Nord Stream pipeline and America's role in blowing it up? Why is that significant as we're watching? Well, we're not watching the peace process roll on in Ukraine, and it's costing Americans, you and me, more and more and more and more money every single day, every single day. What is the buy-in, and what are our interests there? And why did we blow up the pipeline? That has upset our European allies. And then we're going to talk about this mayoral race. I want to know who do you like? Actually, let me thank New Beginnings Church. The rooftop pastor, Reverend Corey Brooks, was our host this weekend on Saturday. But we had all but two of the mayoral candidates. The mayor was not there. She had a prior commitment on the west side, and Dr. Willie Wilson was not there because he also had another commitment. But everybody else was, and it was a forum, not a debate. Debates have people going back and forth. Forum, you ask people questions, and they give you their answers. And so we heard a lot from the candidates, the audience, even though you tell people, no booing, none of that. People are very, very engaged because the needs are great on the ground. And so, of course, yesterday on Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson, we talked about the need for an urban agenda because all of these major cities in the United States, at least, are dealing with fading infrastructures that are 100 years old. They're dealing with public schools that are underfunded, but they don't have the money. You're dealing with a Black exodus from Chicago and from other cities, but people who do not make a lot of money, people who are not affluent, Black, white, brown, yellow, and red, cannot afford to live in these cities. So we have a lot, we talked about a lot, and we have a lot to talk about today. So I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. Hey, Anto from France, sending you much love. Thank you. You like my sweater? I needed it, but it's going to be 50 degrees. So I might have to change. Anyway, hey, Carol, how you doing? Linear Bob is sending you much love today, everybody. Let's get to some of these headlines so that we can get some good news from our gospel sister, Pam Morris. The Kansas City Chiefs won Super Bowl 57 in a thrilling 38-35 game. Yes, it came down to the fourth quarter, everybody. Of course, Philly ruled the first half, particularly the first quarter. But then after halftime, boy, Kansas City came on strong, and they never let up. Both high-powered offenses put on a show and displayed quarterback star power on both sides of the field. As I said, Patrick Mahomes, the eventual MVP, and Jalen Hurts both put on the shows of a lifetime. Indeed, Patrick Mahomes, the MVP, showing the tremendous respect that he and Jalen Hurts have for each other. He said, had Philly won, he'd be the MVP. I think it's important to note that Mr. Omega Psi Phi, Jalen Hurts, his management team, led by Delta, thank you so much, is led by all Black women. His lawyer, manager, agents, everybody. Yeah, think about that. But they're both great, great young men, and I really enjoyed the game, and I'm looking forward to great things from them in the future. Congratulations to you, Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes, and that wonderful, wonderful, wonderful city. U.S. fighter jets scrambled 3 days in a row to shoot down a trio of unidentified aerial objects high above North America. A jet shot down an unidentified object near Lake Huron on Sunday, marking the third time in a week that the U.S. military has taken down objects in North America's airspace. On Saturday, an unidentified object was downed over northern Canada, a day after another object had been shot down over Alaska. Now you have the Chinese surveillance balloon, and now you've got these three objects. What do you think is going on, everybody? Do you think this is coming from hostile forces in the United States? Or do you think these are other life forms? These are questions that a lot of people ought to be asking and are asking. The death toll across Turkey and Syria has risen to an incredible 36 thousand people. Let us pray for the people of Turkey and Syria, everybody. Teams are still rushing to save victims, even 8 days out. They are finding survivors. Let us pray that they find even more. Nearly 60,000 homes are without power in New Zealand's Upper North Island today as the approach of the cyclone Gabrielle brings strong winds, heavy rain, and huge swells to Auckland and nearby regions. And those are just some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. We have got our gospel sister. Oh, I just love her so much. Pam Morris. We love her. She's been on vacation. You know, she and her husband are forever honeymooning, but let me tell you something. I'm not mad at her. You got to get her book though. 57 Days. Wait for a New Heart. She is a heart transplant recipient. I've got to have her on the show because many of us are so reluctant to become donors, and particularly in the African American community, it's understandable given the amount of experimentation that we've had to endure. But for a donor, we would not have Pam Morris with us. And so I just thank God for for that person who saved you, their family, and we thank God for you because it's given you a chance to continue to be with us and to continue to serve and uplift us as you do day in and day out. Pam Morris, love you so much. What is the good news today?
And I love you too, and I thank God for you, Santita, and thank you for this opportunity. Today, great things happen when we pray. Great things happen when we pray. I just heard, and congratulations, Super Bowl, yes. I just heard you say, talk about the death toll had climbed to over 30, I think you said 36,000 persons.
Yes, ma'am.
The Turkey-Syria earthquake.
Yes, ma'am.
On yesterday, a 10-year-old girl named Tubi, was rescued after spending 147 hours under rubble in southern Turkey. 35-year-old, after 149 hours, was rescued. Great things happen when you pray. They never stop praying. I think about the balloon. I don't know if they know if it was a spy or not. I don't know. But I think about that it did not harm any of us, any of our people. I think about the deaths that are going on, the gun violence. So much is going on, and we have to keep praying, everybody. We've got to pray. In James 5:16, it says the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. Now that could be a woman or a man. Okay, there is nothing that prayer cannot touch and change. There is nothing. We must pray, everybody. God is not against us. He is for us. So we need to pray. Every believer is called to prayer. It is a gift that the Lord God, the great Jesus, has given to all of us. I am convinced that prayer is not for a special group of people. It's not to go to church. It's not for just the members in the church. It's for everybody. Never forget prayer is fellowship with God. Prayer is a lifestyle. I pray every day and sometimes several times of the day. Ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be open. For everyone who asks, they receive. And he who seeks, finds. And him that knocks, the door is open for you. No matter which prayer we pray, we must have faith. It is impossible. If you don't have faith, how do you think something's going to happen if you don't have faith? God would have never brought me out if I would not have had faith waiting for a heart. God bless me. One of the first things you must get into your heart is that it is God's will for you to ask him. It's God's will. Let me tell you what's in St. John 14, 13 and 14. And whatever you ask, and whatever, I'm going to say it one more time. Let me slow down. And whatever you ask in my name, that I will do, that the Father must be glorified in the Son. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it. Now, that's what the Bible is saying. Ask anything in my name. It tells you in John 5:14-15. Now, this is the confidence that we have in him. That if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. No matter what you're going through, no matter what's going on, please do me a favor. Do me a favor. Remember this one thing I say: great things happen when you pray. Pray. No matter what it is, no matter what you're going through, no matter what it is, pray. Because great things happen when we pray. He kicks me when I ride the expressways and people pass me on the shoulder and I call on the name of Jesus. Great things happen when you pray. Thank you, Santita. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder. You're bringing me my great grandmother Tippy to me. She used to say that all the time. Pray, pray, pray without ceasing. And she prayed throughout the day, and she has been heavy on my mind. So I want to thank you because I feel like you're speaking. I know you're speaking to someone out there today. And whatever your faith commitment, even if you don't have one, I want you to hold on to something, to that which is good. Know that the universe, know that God is good. Know that we were not brought to earth to endure cruelty. Yes.
Before you move on, look up the song, anybody that's listening.
Mm.
Jesse Dixon recorded, I Know What Prayer Can Do.
Ooh.
Dorothy Norwood recorded, Somebody Prayed for Me. I'm so glad they prayed for me. My grandmother prayed for me. All right, I'm going to stop.
No. Somebody prayed for me, had me on their mind, took the time and prayed for me. I'm so glad they prayed. I'm so glad they prayed for me. Hallelujah. Thank you so much for that. I love you, Pam Morris, everybody. You've got to get the book, everybody. 57 Days. Wait for a New Heart. Not just a physical heart, but a change of heart, everybody. We all need to be renewed by the changing and the cleaning of our hearts. We've got Dr. Shanina Knighton on with us today. You know what? You had a very interesting post. Brilliant infection preventionist, college lecturer. You do so much. You said oppression. You talked about oppression in healthcare spaces. And I thought it was interesting because we have the woman you just heard she's a heart transplant recipient. And many African Americans are absolutely, many, if not most of us are loath to become donors because we don't trust the system. And many people think that we're just paranoid, but it's not just history. You treat it dismissively oftentimes when you go get an exam. A lot of our doctors and nurses are overwhelmed, but we tend to overlook people who are not privileged. Let's just put it that way. Why did you post about oppression in healthcare spaces, Dr. Knighton?
Good morning. Because the thing is, Santita, oftentimes it was more so that post was meant to signify why we need to be the CEO of our own health. And so that was the underlying mission or message. That, yes, you may go to someone that may try to think that you're crazy when you're telling them that you're experiencing certain symptoms or that something is off, something is not right. You may be asking for certain tests. A prime example is I know a young lady who it's interesting because we were talking about the hair relaxer harm. You have, let's say, conditions such as endometriosis and cervical cancer, uterine cancer, like those things tend to impact your hormones. And so emotionally, she's like, I want to do one thing, but my heart is telling me I need to do this, but emotionally I'm all over the place. And I asked her, I said, well, have you spoken with a hormone specialist such as an endocrinologist? She tells me, she said, my primary has never mentioned that. And not only did her primary never mention it, when she went to go ask her primary would not give her a consult. So oftentimes people will let the train stop there. But if it's something else that you want to try and you feel like your provider is not advocating for you, you need to switch providers. because sometimes you can stick with the provider for such an extended period of time that they think they know you so well that they may or may not be aware of other treatments or think of other treatments because they've been so used to treating you the same way. That is why many people say, oh, I'm going to go for a second opinion. A second opinion can work against you sometimes because you're thinking like, okay, well, if I have this information and that information, then it may be a coin toss. But sometimes you need the outside perspective in order for you to be able to make a better decision. When I talk about oppression, it's just mentioning that many people may not acknowledge your health in a manner for which you acknowledge your health. They may not understand you culturally the way that they should understand you in order to be able to give you optimal treatment. So with you understanding some of these challenges within our healthcare system, the inequities that exist when it comes to a lack of resources, such as insurance, such as, let's say, money to be able to cover what the insurance doesn't provide, which could impact care, it's important for you to understand that as we are facing our healthcare system, shortages are happening, insurance is changing, hospitals are under concern when it comes to being able to be sustainable. You have to put yourself first and realize that, yes, the healthcare system is there meant to help you. It is not meant to control you. Meaning you have to be in control of how it is you're feeling, be able to articulate that, and then speak up with someone that is going to listen and act in a way that is going to improve your quality of life.
I love that. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Think of Serena Williams, Dr. Knighton. This is one of the best conditioned athletes, persons in the world. And she and her sister have autoimmune issues. She's had issues with blood clots after she had her baby. She felt the clot coming, and no one would listen to her. I was like, and but for, I'm sure, I mean, because remember, she has a white husband. And look, everybody, sadly, race and racism figures is a factor in our everyday lives. And I know he's, yeah. And so, she not only was advocating for herself, but she had him. Think about that. Think about that, everybody. Be the CEO of your own health. And remember, your doctor's a member of your board, not the chair. Love you, Dr. Shanina Knighton. Hey, Dr. Nina, HEYDRNINA. Follow her in social media. You will not be disappointed. Let's talk about Ukraine on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Oh, Dr. Knighton, thank you so much for that. Because because I want to bring, I'm going to bring the woman you just heard, Pamela Morris, back on to walk us through her journey to get a new heart. And it's just, it's interesting because so many of us, boy, we absolutely don't trust the system. We don't, and some of us don't even know that we can advocate for ourselves. We do feel dismissed.
Right, and I always want to just remind people, right, because we use words such as systems and, like, let's say, government. And the one thing that I tell people that we need to think about is the granularity of that, is that it still boils down to human beings. And it's holding human beings accountable. It's making sure that with every interaction, when someone is not doing something that they're supposed to do, making sure that you hold them accountable. Like, took an oath, they took a promise that they would protect the public. And so when we know that that is the case and we do not hold them accountable, it's almost as if we are condoning the behavior. So we know that they may have not treated us right, and then it makes it okay for them to do it to the next individual, and then we end up with that system. So that system is made up of more than one part that is moving in a certain direction. And so we can reverse that direction by making sure that we're holding individuals accountable. And sometimes it's so easy for, hey, that system or this is that issue. But we have to hold people accountable, and we have to change the system and make sure that it's more ideal and more reflective of what we want when we say health.
And you know what?
Sending Bryce Green, Dr. David Gibbs, and Chappelle through.
Thank you. You know, Reverend Jackson has been saying for years, I am somebody. And you have to know first that you are somebody and that you are worthy of the best of care and that no one should ever dismiss you. And if someone dismisses you or otherwise thinks that does not take your view of your health, your opinions in the highest consideration, they're not for you. Just know that and keep it moving. You know, if someone dismisses me, particularly when it comes to my health, I'm done. Out. I will not be disrespected. I won't. But let me say, stay right there because you might learn a little something about Ukraine, what's going on. Dr. Gibbs?
Good morning.
Good morning. And we have you, Bryce Green.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, make sure we're not on speaker and make sure we're not on earbuds. We lose the quality of sound with that. Chaparral, you there? Hello?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. And Dr. Knighton, you're still here?
60 seconds, everybody.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, fantastic. We're coming right up. Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Let me pull this up. I got you. Hey, Abraham, how you doing, my sweet?
Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. At the top of the hour, we will be talking about this mayoral race. So many issues continue to come out here in Chicago. And today, citywide, voting in your ward begins. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And we have got a lot to talk about today with that race. We need to have a lot to talk about with respect to Ukraine. It's costing Americans a lot of money, and you need to be on top of this, of this particular issue, because we continue to give them money. We're trying to figure out what's going on. Most of us don't even know what the central issue is, aside from Putin. There's got to be something else going on, because a lot of people are doing a lot of business over there too. But what about this Nord Stream attack that the United States said, NATO said we didn't touch it? And it turns out Seymour Hersh and Bryce Green and some other tremendous journalists have said, not true. So we got to talk about that, because now our European allies who need that pipeline are a little bent out of shape, and they're calling us war profiteers. The United States. Whoa. Let's talk about that, everybody. Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278 with Dr. David Gibbs, University of Arizona, brilliant historian, and of course, brilliant journalist, Bryce Green, from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. But before we do that, we have got your Pearl. Are you still taking any orders for Valentine's Day? Chaparral celebration is by us?
Yes, Santita, we are doing some fresh flowers for Valentine's Day, but today is the last day to put in your order, as well as also your chocolate-covered strawberries. But Santita, we are planning our Courtney Copeland Memorial Gala, and that's going to be on March 3rd, 2023, at the JLM Community Center. And so we're asking everyone to come out and support this great cause. all money raised go to support our program, especially our college scholarship fund. And so that's mainly why we do the big gala so that we can send kids to college. So we are asking everyone to visit us at www.copelandmemorial.com. That's www.copelandmemorial.com. And you can purchase your tickets just by clicking the link. Very simple that you can go on there and get your tickets. And if you can't attend, we're asking everyone to please consider making a donation or purchasing a ticket for a family who has lost a child to gun violence in Chicago. We have invited several families to come out and share this evening with us. It is a formal gala, so we are going to have music, spoken word, great music, as well as also great food. So you can always visit us at www.copelandmemorial.com to get your tickets. Thank you so much, Santita.
You are very welcome. Hey, everybody. Go to CopelandMemorial.com so you can get more information. Let us talk about the U.S. media's intellectual no-fly zone on U.S. culpability in the Nord Stream attack. That's what you wrote, Bryce Green, in Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. I said, this man, you continue to dig for information, and I guess it's a very scientific approach. You're like, well, I look at the evidence and whatever comes up, comes up. And that's what real journalism really ought to be about. You ought to have a scientific approach. You should not go in with preconceived notions, or if you have them, and we all do, you ought to be willing to throw them out the window if the evidence contradicts it, right? Bryce Green, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, and Dr. David Gibbs from the University of Arizona, brilliant historian. So let's get right to it. U.S. media's intellectual no-fly zone on U.S. culpability in the Nord Stream attack. What did you mean by that, Bryce Green?
Well, I meant that the U.S. media, they didn't even address the possibility that the U.S. might have been involved in the Nord Stream bombing. The Nord Stream attack happened in September, and it was a major escalation in the war in Ukraine, but the problem was that no one openly took responsibility for attack. And Western media figures and Western political officials were very quick to blame Russia, but of course they had no evidence for doing so. And in fact, if you take a look at the circumstantial evidence about who has supported the pipeline and who has opposed it, and what U.S. officials have said, the circumstantial case, the answer to the classic question, cui bono, who benefits, is very clearly the United States. The United States has opposed the Nord Stream pipeline since its inception. The idea is that the pipeline would take natural gas from Russia to Germany, thus allowing German manufacturing to benefit from cheaper Russian natural gas instead of having to buy it from partners in the U.S., which would be more expensive. The U.S. opposed the pipeline because they said that it would make Germany too dependent on Russian gas. And they actually sanctioned companies who were working on the pipeline. This has been going on since the Obama administration. And before the war started, the Biden administration was saying that, well, if Russia invaded, then the U.S. will make sure the Nord Stream pipeline doesn't go through. And they made all sorts of threatening statements about it. And after the pipeline was destroyed, U.S. officials called it a tremendous opportunity, and they talked about how much that this comported with their strategic objectives. And in fact, you're seeing liquid natural gas, and the companies that sell that, they're making record profits here in the U.S. So if you're an investigator and you're wondering who was behind the Nord Stream pipeline, the most obvious choice would be the United States. But that's not what the U.S. media did. They completely ignored it. Even when German officials said that they were open to the idea that Western powers were behind the attack, the Western press almost completely ignored this. The U.S. press almost completely ignored it. And then, less than a week, or around a week after that report about German officials, the legendary reporter Seymour Hersh released a report about how the U.S. did it. And it was very detailed, and it talked about a joint operation between the Norwegian Navy, They talked about naval divers planting C4 and a remote explosive that was detonated months after it was placed. But the problem is that the U.S. media has ignored this too. And to the extent that they have covered it, they've dismissed it. They've said that Cy Hirsch is unreliable and he's a conspiracy theorist. You know, the famed debunking, quote-unquote, website Snopes, they published an article about how we should be wary because Cy Hirsch's reporting only relies on one anonymous source. And that doesn't happen all the time in Western media for even more serious things. So the question is, what's more credible? Denials from the U.S. or a well-credentialed reporter making allegations that fit with what we already know about reality? And the fact that the U.S. media is really unable or unwilling to parse these facts to get to the bottom of it is really troubling. I'm not saying that Seymour Hersh is unimpeachable, that his report is the gospel, that it's 100% true, but it's a piece of evidence that we can use to support the case that the U.S. did it. And if we had a serious press, they would be investigating it, trying to suss out fact from fiction, trying to figure out what Hersh got right, what Hersh got wrong. Instead, they're dismissing it entirely. And so a major event in the Ukraine war is being completely ignored, downplayed, and shielded from the American public. And that's pretty significant.
Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. We're talking about the Nord Stream pipeline, that attack. What happened there? More and more, the finger is being pointed at Western powers, specifically the United States. Why is that important? Is it something that should at least be investigated by CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS? I mean, the great newspapers, which increasingly are becoming unstaffed. What do you think, everybody? Call us at 773-763-9278. Dr. David Gibbs, what about Seymour Hersh's investigation? What about because I connect his findings to European powers calling Americans now war profiteers. They're saying you're standing between us and peace, and we need the Nord Stream pipeline, particularly the Germans. Talk to me. I mean, what is the importance of Nord Stream, and why was this explosion of consequence?
Okay, the Nord Stream pipelines, there are two of them. There was Nord Stream 1 that was done some time ago, and Nord Stream 2, which is a second pipeline that was completed just before the war began, but not operationalized. And it was owned jointly by mostly Russia, 51%, and 49% was a joint ownership by 3 European countries, led by Germany, also Netherlands and France were involved in it. And so 51% Russian-owned, however, and built at enormous expense and at great difficulty, both pipelines. It was blown up, as we all know, in September of this past year. And all of the circumstantial evidence, even before the Hersh story, all of it, pointed to the United States, since Russia had no motive to blow up a pipeline that they own 51%. And the United States clearly did have a very obvious motive to do it. And so, just again, qui bono, as Bryce Green noted, that basic question in any investigation would strongly point the finger away from Russia and toward the United States. Plus, there were multiple leaks by top figures in the Biden administration, beginning with Biden himself, as well as Secretary of State Tony Blinken and Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland. Both before and after, before basically the explosion, saying that Nord Stream 2 will I think the phrase Biden used was cease to exist or something to that effect. And then after the pipeline explosion, taking great pleasure in the explosion. I believe that Secretary Blinken called it a great opportunity. All of these things strongly point to U.S. involvement. This is even before the Hersh story. Let me add, by the way, I don't frankly get the impression that the Biden diplomatic team are very talented, just because they kept on leaking this basic information. very incriminating statements publicly. In any case, so Hirsch does come along, and he evidently does have an inside source with a great deal of detail here. It is only one source that he went public with. However, I have been following Hirsch for about half a century. I remember the Eli massacre, which took place, I believe the exposure was when I was 11 years old, and I remember it very well. And Hirsch is the most experienced journalist in the world in evaluating these types of covert operations. And based on how he operates, I'd be surprised if he has only one source. He has only one source that is willing to be quoted, clearly. But I would bet he has more than one source, including ones who don't want to be quoted. But in any case, even with one source, this source matches everything we know about the public record. There's a mountain of evidence pointing at the United States as the principal culprit here. And no evidence whatsoever pointing at the Russians. And again, as Bryce Green noted, there's no serious consideration given to this at all in the mainstream media. You have seen a remarkable deterioration of reporting in the United States and Europe, I should add, in the sense that Hirsch used to break his exposés in places like the New York Times, the New Yorker, the New York Review of Books, the hardcore of the journalistic mainstream. He would never be able to publish something like this now in any mainstream venue. He'd have to go to Substack, which is what he did. But again, this is somebody who is a legendary reporter, one of the most accomplished people in the history of journalism. That's to be taken very seriously. And as I said, circumstantial evidence backs it up entirely. We really do need is a full investigation, either by a mainstream paper like the New York Times or by the House and Senate. That's what we really need here.
Is this considered to be an act of war, Dr. Gibbs?
Well, a deliberate attack on infrastructure would be considered, a major infrastructure like this could be viewed indeed as a classic act of war. Ironically, the principal victim of the act of war was U.S. ally Germany and two other U.S. allies, Netherlands and France. Sorry, I'm congested here. So what's very surprising to me is you're really not getting the kind of reaction I would expect from countries that have just been severely victimized. Now, the Germans are still going along with the American policy. At least publicly, German officials are not yet accusing the United States of having done this. Behind the scenes, I'm sure there's a lot of discussion, but at least publicly, nothing yet. So the extraordinary compliance by the Europeans, notably the Germans, is really quite remarkable here. So, they're not treating it as an act of war, at least not yet.
773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Bryce Green, why should we be concerned about the reporting that we have and have not gotten about this particular incident? And I mean, increasingly about other issues. It just seems like there is a censoring. Facebook is in it. The social media, these engines are absolutely in it, or so it appears, or am I mistaken?
No, you're exactly right. Like Dr. Gibbs said, there has been a serious deterioration of the quality of journalism over the last few decades. And these last 5 years, with Russiagate, the Trump years, and especially during this Ukrainian war, the media has increasingly taken the position that, well, we are going to be on Team USA. We're going to be on the right side of history, and we're going to be cheerleaders for what we believe to be the right cause. And in this case, they believe that the right cause is supporting Ukraine against the Russian invasion and escalating the war and making sure that Ukraine's image in the West is pristine and unblemished by harsh realities of corruption, of far-right influence, and even the fact that they're about that the war isn't necessarily going their way. And all of this contributes to a sort of environment where, well, you can't even talk about the realities of why the U.S. might have wanted to bomb the Nord Stream pipeline, because that would go against the public narrative. And so all these media figures, they're not stupid. They can put two and two together like me and Dr. Gibbs just did. But even Jeffrey Sachs, the Columbia professor, he went on TV and he said, well, a lot of journalists suspect the U.S. was involved, but they know that they just can't say it. They know that the papers won't publish it. They know that that's not the system that they operate in, where they can speak freely in this sense. And so you really have a serious challenge to the myth of the free press. And if this is a free press, well, then it's certainly not a serious one. They're not serious about getting to the bottom of facts. They're not serious about challenging their government on statements. They're not serious about asking what's really going on. Only one reporter, to my knowledge, asked the State Department to comment on this Cy Hirsch story, and, he was pretty much dismissed. It was called propaganda or a conspiracy theory. That's really lazy when it comes to issues as important as U.S.-German, U.S.-Russian relations. If the U.S. was indeed involved in the pipeline, like Dr. Gibbs said, but we need a serious congressional investigation. We need the public state to assert its authority over the national security imperatives. We need the public to be informed and active in how their country makes policy. But this, matrix of distortion that the mainstream media seems to create is really making that a difficult task.
But and how does this impact us, Dr. Gibbs, in terms of how we are perceived, not just, in the Brazils and the South Africans, the BRICS nations, the Indias, the Chinas, okay? In the global South, if you will, the world where all the minerals are, the former colonies that are now ascendant. How does this impact us with our European allies? Because that's what the West is. Even if it's New Zealand, which is way at the bottom of the world, they're the West. Australia, way at the bottom of the world, they're the West. It's European. How does this impact us with them? Because I'm sure Germany can't be happy about this, Dr. Gibbs.
Well, I'm very surprised at the extent to which the Europeans have got along with all this, even after the explosion of the Nord Stream pipeline, given the fact that it's so obviously detrimental to their interests and is lowering their living standards. And Germany especially, it may raise real questions about whether or not Germany can remain the industrial power it traditionally has been, given that it's all dependent on inexpensive energy, which is no longer available. On the other hand, you have this extraordinary tone of sort of moral self-righteousness coming out of Europe. There's a far-left German politician named Sarah Wagenknecht who's been very critical of this, and she's repeatedly noted how just a tone of self-righteousness seems to be replacing any kind of traditional conception of national interest, or even just replacing logic. And the sort of outrage of Russia's invasion, which is understandable up to a point, has replaced any consideration of whether or not the United States is playing playing such a moral role here. And it seems to be obscuring any real discussion in the mainstream media in Europe as well as here of what has just happened with the Nord Stream pipeline. Now, I don't read German, but I do read French and English. I'm not really seeing very much critical coverage of this. In Britain in particular, the press, I would say, is even more uncompromisingly pro-war than it is here. That is a historic change. I mean, during the War on Terror, you had much better reporting in Europe than you had in the United States. But that's clearly changed, and Europe has become virtually indistinguishable from the United States, at least in terms of public discussion. Now, how long that'll last, I don't know. And it could be that over time you're going to get an erosion of support as it sinks into people that this is damaging their living standards. On the other hand, in the global South, in places like India, in Mexico, Brazil, South Africa, I suspect people are laughing their heads off at the notion that the U.S. had nothing to do with this. I can't imagine that it's going to be taken very seriously outside of kind of the NATO bubble, which is what we have here.
Talking with Dr. David Gibbs, University of Arizona, historian, and of course, Bryce Green from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. I've got a couple of minutes left, and I want each of you to have the final word. Dr. Gibbs, 1 minute for you. What's next?
Well, yeah, the explosion of the Nord Stream pipeline and very likely U.S. association with that explosion should underscore the extent to which this is a very cynical war, and the U.S. has been playing a very cynical game from the very start. It's not the moral war people think it is. And, I think once you start looking at the United States, the extraordinary ruthlessness in U.S. policy and the willingness to attack infrastructure, it really should raise more basic questions about what the U.S. purpose is more generally in this war.
Bryce Green, what has been left unsaid in this conversation today? I mean, all of you are getting a lot of kudos. I mean, you and Dr. Gibbs and you, Bryce Green, because people are saying, we've not heard this. We have not heard this in mainstream media. Thank you, Star Child, and so many of you. And, I have to tell you, Linear Bob, it's not just Fox News. All of these news outlets give you opinion. And if you can turn from channel to channel to channel, they're covering the same stories at the same time, and they are saying virtually the same thing. Bryce Green.
Right. One thing to understand about this war that really isn't talked about enough is to the extent that U.S. goals involved dominating Europe. The reason that the West opposed the Nord Stream pipeline wasn't just about the Russians' ability to leverage natural gas in the event of any sort of conflict. What it was really about is making sure that German industry was tied to U.S. industry rather than Russian industry. If Germany and Russia had a close economic link and they were able to support each other, well, that would mean that they would represent an economic center that could potentially at some point challenge the U.S. center of economic power. And this, in fact, is the basis of the U.S. policy towards Russia, towards China, towards the rest of the world, that its economic power is threatened. And Germany, with a strong manufacturing sector, represented a threat to that. In fact, this was one of the original purposes of NATO, to keep the Russians out, the Americans in, and to keep the Germans down. And that's been largely successful, but we're starting to see a potential shift in that. And these larger geopolitical issues are pretty much ignored in favor of, like Dr. Gibbs said, moral outrage. And so I encourage everybody to try and set aside their moral outrage, try and look into the real motives, the power incentives behind American power and American policy.
Amen. You know what? Hassan wants to ask you a question. We'll do that during the break. Coming up, the Chicago mayoral race. It is getting hot, everybody. The election is the 28th today. Citywide, in every ward, you'll be able to vote. Please get out and vote, everybody. Don't let 10 or 20% of the people decide what we all have to live with. Be back in just a minute on the Santita Jackson Show. You wonderful gentlemen. I want to bring up Hassan. I'm going to have to do this quickly because I need to, of course, I don't have a lot of lines, but I've got to bring up my next panel. But Hassan wanted to give a comment or question or ask a question about the Nord Stream pipeline. Hassan?
Yes, please.
Hassan, of course.
Taking my call.
Yes.
So my question is very, first of all, thank you for the work you do. And thank you for those very knowledgeable gentlemen that are talking about the Nord Stream pipeline. I have my reservation. I don't want to rush to incriminate the U.S. just based on the potential for intent. So to me, you are doing the same thing that you're accusing the rest of the media for not doing. In other words, I've not read the article that you're referring to, and I'm sorry for that. So for that, if any facts in the article do take away what I'm saying, that's perfectly okay. But what I am saying is that we need to look at evidence of the intent of the U.S. And then the other thing is, also evidence from the crime scene itself. So I remember paying attention to it when it happened. And while I was listening to you, I scrambled back to what would have been so important. This is what I remember. One of the analysts that took a very good look at this from a technical standpoint came to this point that's kind of similar to if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. Now let me say what this is. If the pipeline was blown from the inside out, it's more likely that either Russia, which is where the pipeline starts, or Europe, where the pipeline ends, would have done this. If the pipeline was blown from the outside in, then it could have been any other actor. So I would like your panel to handle that simple fact.
Well, let me, Hassan, I'm not trying. Oh, no. And I'm only rushing because I don't have many lines and I have to let them respond to your question so that I can free up the lines and get my other guests on. Okay, sweetie. But Bryce, Dr. Gibbs, you want? Oh no, thank you, and thank you for listening, and thank you for thinking, Dr. Gibbs.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't really speak to the technical aspects of this because that's beyond my knowledge.
Sure.
But, multiple investigations have been undertaken by several European countries, and they so far found no evidence of Russian involvement in this attack. Interestingly, they never really looked at the issue of U.S. involvement, nor has anybody really explored that issue. But Russian involvement has been looked at, and there's been no evidence of it. And I think basically, if there were any evidence, you can be sure we'd be hearing about it by now.
And then you have other actors who could blow it from the inside or the outside because you have saboteurs, you have spies everywhere. I mean, that's just a fact. Bryce?
All right. To the point of whether or not it was blown from the outside or inside, the Swedish government, it was the Swedish and the Danish government, they conducted an initial report of the seismic activity of the pipeline, and they concluded that this was an explosion from the outside in. But you are correct in saying that there is no hard evidence linking the U.S. attack. But my point is, and has always been, that serious media should investigate where the evidence points initially. And initially, all the circumstantial evidence, the means and the motive, point to the U.S. And I think that is the key point here. And if you look at the way Sweden conducted their investigation, well, Germany was pretty upset that they weren't allowed to be included in a joint investigation. Sweden decided that since they had to protect state secrets potentially, that they were going to keep the results of the investigation, largely under wraps. But, we're starting to see German officials and German members of parliament start to ask bigger questions. So it's very likely that we'll see some sort of revelation in the near future. And then Dr. Starks, Key Attorney Colleen, Kevin Lampy. Okay,
great. Well, gentlemen, I'm going to call you back very soon. I've got to move my other guests in because we need these lines. But I thank you so much for all that you do. You all just do wonderful. You do such wonderful work, and I have tweeted and sent out everything. Although it was very interesting when I try to go through Hootsuite there. I'm getting disconnected all the time. Perhaps it's my content. But that's all right. I'm keep on with it. Sending you much love, Dr. Gibbs, and to you as well, Bryce Green. You do. Thank you. Blessings to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Devin, would you need to move them to other lines? Would that be better?
No, I already have Kevin Lampy on the one line. You're on the other line, so we're good.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. Okay. Thank you. Kevin Lampy?
Good morning.
Good morning. And everyone, just make sure you're not on headphones or the speakers. Aaron Connolly?
Good morning, Ms. Santita. How are you?
Good morning, Attorney Connolly. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fully caffeinated and ready to go.
Oh, girl. Okay. Dwight McKee.
Monday.
Oh, yes. Yes, I'm ready to.
60 seconds, everybody.
Dwight?
Good morning.
Okay, great. Dr. Starks.
Here.
Fantastic.
Good morning.
You all sound great. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, it sounds great. So stay right there. We're coming right up.
Seconds.
Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's a joy to be with you one day before Valentine's Day, Monday, February 13th, one day after the Super Bowl. Was that thrilling? I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And of course, we've got our people from Venezuela and Brazil and France and Los Angeles. Hey, Carol, my sister from another mister. How you doing? And Anna Johnson, and of course, Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia. Hey, Kansas City won the Super Bowl yesterday. Patrick Mahomes is the MVP of the Super Bowl and of the NFL. But I'm going to tell you, Patrick Mahomes even said, look, had Philadelphia won, Jalen Hurts would have been the MVP. They both played those kind of games. It was just a great, great Super Bowl. And then you find out Rihanna's pregnant. I knew she was a little full. I knew she wasn't really moving around. And there were like 1,000 people, 1,000 dancers. That was what a spectacle. But then she's having another baby. Congratulations, Rihanna. Bless your heart. Wow, wow, wow. Whew, what a thrilling game. What a thrilling game. 38-35. Right up until the last minute, you didn't know what was going to happen. Of course, Philadelphia was on fire in the first half. And then after halftime, Kansas City came out and did not take their feet off the gas pedal. It just was a thrilling game. That's the kind of game you want for the Super Bowl. I am Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. We're talking about the Chicago mayoral election. Today, you can vote in every ward across the city. Early voting started on January 26th. You had to go to the super sites, but now you can vote in your ward. Please go out and vote, everybody. You don't know what's going to happen on election day. Something might come up for you. But please don't let 10, 20, 30, 50% even make a decision for you. If somebody's going to vote, they'll be making a decision for you if you don't vote. Get out and vote today, everybody. In Chicago, it's going to be a positively beautiful day. Sunny, 48 degrees will be the high. Minneapolis, 41 degrees. Sunny will be the high. Fantastic. And hey, in the NBA today, everything's going to resume. Everybody took a little bit of time off for the Super Bowl. The Timberwolves will be facing off against the Mavericks, and the Magic will be playing the Bulls. In the NHL, the Panthers will be playing the Wild. Everyone was looking at the Super Bowl. That was the story, everybody. So let's move on to something else. Let us look at this earthquake. 36,000 people between Turkey and Syria, following last Monday's catastrophic earthquake, have died. But people are still surviving. They're still pulling survivors out of the rubble. Let us continue to pray, because miracles can happen every day. Teams are still rushing to save victims. And let us hope that they find even more people there. U.S. fighter jets scrambled 3 days in a row to shoot down a trio of unidentified aerial objects high above North America. A jet shot down an unidentified object near Lake Huron on Sunday, marking the third time in 1 week that the U.S. military has taken down objects in North American airspace. On Saturday, an unidentified object was downed over northern Canada. A day after, another object had been shot down over Alaska. What's going on, everybody? You got the Chinese surveillance balloon that was taken down by F-22s off the coast of South Carolina last weekend, with no indication at this point that the unidentified objects have any connection to China. National security officials, understandably, are on the edge, according to this CNN report. And those are just some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. I want to thank once again New Beginnings Church, the rooftop pastor, Corey Brooks, Reverend Corey Brooks, Pastor Corey Brooks, and that magnificent New Beginnings family. They hosted a packed house. And we want to thank you for coming out. A packed house, a full house, the Rainbow Push mayoral debate. Tia from Fox 32, thank you, thank you, thank you. What a magnificent partner to have. She is just the highest professional, and she brought her baby. Oh my gosh, she and her husband had their baby with them. Oh, she was so precious. I love it. I love it. And this woman's back at work looking like she had, like, nothing happened to her. Just gorgeous and so brilliant, so bright. But we had a wonderful time, and a special shout out to Alderman Orinda Troutman, who runs everything over at New Beginnings. So wonderful group of worshipers, a wonderful group of young people, and elders. I mean, it is just a magnificent church at 66th and King Drive. Thank you so much, Stanley, for correcting me. It is an absolutely wonderful church. It feels great too. And we had a marvelous time there. And we just thank you, New Beginnings, for hosting us on Saturday. And I'm so glad that so many of you tuned in and really enjoyed what you saw. Everybody except the mayor and Dr. Wilson were there. The mayor, to be fair, had a prior commitment. She had a prior commitment on the west side, and she said, I cannot break this commitment to even be there with you. And every time we've asked her to do something, she has shown up. So I want us to be fair. And of course, Dr. Wilson also had a prior commitment. You respect that. But everybody else was there. It was very interesting watching the reactions to the various candidates and listening to all of them with their knowledge of the issues. It's really an embarrassment of riches, however you feel about any of the candidates. They're all very, very, well, they've dedicated their lives to public service, and they're all qualified to be where they are. So we'll see what's going to happen. So I'm going to go down the line and ask all of you, as we look at these polls. The WBEZ poll basically has a statistical dead heat. You have Chuy Garcia, Congressman Garcia at the top, Paul Vallis, and then Mayor Lightfoot. They're basically within a margin of error of each other. What's going to happen? Only the top two candidates will make the runoff. What are the issues, everybody? And now people are asking about Paul Vallis and his Chicago residency. Now, it has been ruled that he actually does. He has established Chicago residency, but he really has lived someplace else too. What does that mean? What about the Black exodus from Chicago? What are the issues that really are driving you to the polls, or that you're most concerned about? A gentleman approached me. He did not come back to me. I wish he had. And he said, I want you to ask a question about safety on the trains and the buses. He said, because we don't feel safe on the trains and the buses. And I hope, if you're listening to me, sir, that you will call in and just reach out to me, because I told you I wanted to explore that with you. If people are not feeling safe on the trains and the buses, and standing on the bus stops and standing on the L platforms, what is going on, everybody? So let's get to this wonderful panel. Of course, we have got Dr. Robert Starks, preeminent, not just political scientist, but he is also one of our most esteemed professors from Northeastern Illinois University's Center for Inner City Studies. But he's always put his great academic credentials. He's also put it in the organizing and activist face. So we've always appreciated that about him. Brilliant social scientist Dwight McKee, attorney Aaron Connolly, brilliant political organizer and activist, and Kevin Lampe, brilliant political consultant. Let me start with you, Kevin Lampe. What about these polls that continue to, we can't get anything definitive out of this, Kevin? I mean, I don't even know what's going to happen on election day. What can we read anything into any of this?
Well, there's two tiers in this race. And I think the top tier is the mayor, Lori Lightfoot, Paul Dallas, Chuy Garcia, and Brandon Johnson is in that top tier as well. And then we have a second tier candidate. But I will say this, having watched the last couple of forums and we've been there on Saturday, an amazing event put together by everybody. Congratulations to all that were behind the scenes making sure that happened. Everybody did a really good job. I mean, I'm going to say, be honest here, everybody there that participated in the forum looked like they were ready to serve as mayor and they understand the issues that matter. And I'll say the sleeper person from the forum on Saturday was Jamal Green. Strong, steady, thoughtful, and aggressive. But it is, many people I'm talking to are telling me they haven't made their decision yet. And even though war by war voting is starting today, people are still making their decisions. I think that's reflected in the poll, but it is a toss-up. I think who's leading the race right now.
Well, what do you read into this, Dr. Bob Starks?
I agree with Lefty. This is going to be a very, very close election. And again, as Lefty and I have said before, polls are a little bit deceiving. I wouldn't put too much emphasis on polls as being absolute. Because we've got, 2 more weeks to go. Johnson is moving up and cannot be overlooked. There will be a runoff, and I think it's going to be very, very close. I can't predict exactly who will be in that runoff, but it will be very close between those 4 that Lampy talked about.
I mean, but is it because you were very active in the Harold Washington, in the draft Harold Washington movement, and I think it's important for us to note that he did not want to run for mayor, you all. He did not. He was drafted. He was literally pushed by people like Dr. Bob Starks. I mean, I just have to keep it 100. It's true. That having been said, it is true. It's true. It's true. Look, he had been a machine guy. He'd been kicked out the machine, and he was finally able to get back on his feet. And we have to thank Lou and Georgia Palmer for that, because they literally took him into their home, and they willed him back into this. He was very, very down, very, very down, very, very down. And they literally fed him, and they said, "You still have something to give, Harold." And they stayed with him. They pushed him to run for Congress. They ran him for Congress. And of course, no one can even talk about the genius of Georgia Palmer. I mean, she was the genius that we don't even, she's never gotten the credit that she was due, but she's on the other side of eternity. Mrs. Palmer, I'm giving it to you today because I just love you and thank you and Lou Palmer. And your multicolored cakes, green, red, orange, whatever they were. we love her. But, but that having been said, it was a people's draft. And then 4 years ago with Lori Lightfoot, we were kind of in the same position. Before I move on to Dwight and to Aaron Connolly, we didn't know who was going to win. But Lori Lightfoot was so strong in the debates. People said, "Hey, I'm just going to give her a chance." And unfortunately, I think, people kind of turned on President Preckwinkle, which was unfortunate because she's done so much to serve, but, she's done a great job as president of the Cook County Board of Commissioners. I mean, what do you think this will be like a photo finish?
It will be like a photo finish, believe me. Yes.
That is crazy. Aaron Connolly, what are you making of all of this?
Well, I agree with the experts on this panel that it's going to be an interesting race as always, and it's always down to the finish. I mean, we saw that surprise 4 years ago in a very expensive, let's not remember, let's not forget how much money was spent the last time around when Rahm Emanuel, shocked everyone saying he wasn't going to run again. Then the field went crazy, and it turned into this kind of who knows what's going to happen. But Lori likes to surprise everybody. So there is that possibility that it can be completely different than what the polls are telling us. And with this many folks in the race, with a news cycle that exists in Chicago like none other, momentum can pick up at any stage of this game. So, it's exciting as always to watch and be a part of Chicago politics. But I think it's interesting to see what you hear at the doors and on the phone banks, and kind of that consensus across, different wards within the city. And I think, listening to some of the rhetoric coming out of some of the supporters of Paul Vallis, and where we see money being spent, and we have all these ad buys to look at, and we can see how candidates are honing in their message as they're getting closer to the finish line. And I think it's interesting to see what's really motivating voters to turn out, and what even local candidates are focusing on in this race for mayor of Chicago, and many, many active races for Chicago City Council, which ultimately supports this mayor, right? So it's not just who is on the fifth floor. You are building coalitions. You are, pushing through progress, and that takes numbers on the council. So, people are fighting to the finish line in those races as well, and we have a lot more open seats than usual. So there's a lot of exciting things to watch, and a lot of new leaders to see emerging, as you said this weekend, even in the mayoral race. Not everybody can win, but we have a lot of great talent, political talent, expertise, and people with a real history and commitment to the city. So that's a great thing to see in all of this.
Dwight McKee. Yeah, I mean, you're right. But we're going to revisit these coalitions and what's really pushing people to the polls, because a lot of people approach me with a lot of questions that I wish we would have been able to take. But, Dwight, people have to know that when you have these debates, when you have these fora, you actually have questions that have been constructed and that have been vetted. And you haven't shared them with the candidates, but they might look like they're spontaneous. On one level they are, because you never know what anyone's going to say, but they are planned. And so for anyone who felt that their specific question did not get asked, we did ask a lot of people, and we tried to incorporate your thoughts into the questions that we constructed. So continue to reach out to me, continue to reach out to Rainbow Push, because in fact, we're going to have another forum. I don't know if it'll be a forum or debate before what we anticipate will be the runoff on April 4th. Dwight McKee, what do you make of where we are? Let's just start right here in this block, looking at this new WBEZ poll that shows Congressman Garcia, Mr. Vallis, and the mayor basically in a statistical dead heat.
Well, I think even more important is the 20 to 30% who get to make their minds up. I think it's in the margins that the victory lies. I also think that it's so close because there's so many real good candidates in the race. And, with 9 candidates in the race, the split is going to be somewhere if there were less candidates in the race, I think that you would see that balance much more defined with, a block of voters going to more of a block of voters going to one candidate or another candidate. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it all breaks out. I think that this next month is going to be very important. Next couple of weeks very important in terms of how the 20 to 30% line up. And you never know what course of events that are external may affect where people's heads are. You know, there can be a mass shooting that will take people more into law and order. There can be a strike that takes them more into public service. You know, there can be a natural catastrophe that takes them somewhere else. Everything is up for grabs right now. So we will see how it all plays out.
Well, you know, given that everything is up, why do you think everything is up for grabs? I mean, of course, we have almost an embarrassment of riches. You have a lot of great people running, but is it? I mean, you and a few others have talked about the dynamism in the electorate right now. Dwight, I've got a couple of minutes before I go to break. That just it's almost like all bets are off. More and more Americans want a real third party. More and more Americans don't want to identify as Democrat or Republican. More and more Americans are just fed up with everything. What's going on? Is that what we're seeing here?
Demographics change so much. One, the demographics have changed so much since the Harold Washington days. It's even within the last 10 years, so many blacks have been excommunicated outside the city, driven out of the city. Probably 100, 200,000 blacks have been driven out of the city. A lot of Hispanics have been relocated into the city. A lot of whites have been relocated into the city. And so just the pure demographics of it all have shifted. Secondly, the issues, all of the issues have become almost equally important. Crime and lawlessness now is much of an issue is inflation and the cost of living. And so before, there was no real dominant issues that people just kind of lined up on the side of. Now each person is operating with some dominant issue. And so many people, their issue is crime and punishment. We see crime has been out of control. Many people think that inflation and economic development is the major issue that confronts us. Many people think education is the issue that confronts us. And so based on your orientation and what you subscribe to, pretty much is what is taking your attention and which candidate you're going to follow. Because each one of those candidates pretty much represent one of those interests. It's going to be very interesting.
Hey, everybody, let's talk about this mayoral campaign. And Fania, why don't you call in? Because you're talking about the black exodus from Chicago, and you say that no, taxes are not it, because black people have moved to some areas that are more expensive than Chicago, but they feel that these areas are nicer, they're cleaner, the schools perform better, and on and on and on and on. What is going on here? We've got the black exodus from Chicago. We have got a candidate who may not really live in Chicago. You've got higher taxes in Chicago. You have got people who feel unsafe on public transportation. I mean, just going to work, coming and going to school. There's a lot going on here, a lot. And I could feel that at the mayoral forum that we had at New Beginnings Church that Rainbow Push had. You could feel the electricity in there. People need not just change, they want things to get right, not just better. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about the Chicago mayor's race in just a minute. You know, we're on Facebook Live, everybody, so please keep talking. Fania, you want to call in? And Laura said she's happy to hear your voice. Dwight, she's missed you. Girl, he's been on the past few days. Oh, but I mean, he's been on, girl. I'm going to ask this question, but, you know, Kevin and Dr. Starks and Dwight and Aaron, she said, you know, that people are not getting the reasons for the black exodus from Chicago right. And she wants to know who has studied this issue. any number of entities have studied it, Fania. But she said she's heard anecdotally people say that Black people left Chicago due to the high taxes, although that has been a reason. She said, but she knows a lot of Black people who live in Bolingbrook. You know, a lot of Black folks don't live in Bolingbrook, Fania. You know, a few people live in Bolingbrook and Plainfield. And if they live in those places, they make enough money to live there. And you said their taxes are much higher than Chicago. I hear you. She said, so you don't think taxes are the issue? Not for them, right? But you said for you, you think it is their perception of crime, quality of neighborhood schools, the cleanliness of the city, the aging infrastructure of Chicago. Although, you know, if Chicago collapses, those suburbs will too. But why don't you all speak to Fania's question?
Well, part of it is that Ron said on the HUD money is that HUD is his money subscribed for more income housing. And Ron said on the money and wouldn't invest it in the city. He made part of the precondition of using the money is you had to move to the suburbs. It was a calculated plan to get the inner city from Blacks and to move the young white the young white guys from the suburbs who wanted to come into the city, who wanted to have an urban experience. And so they began to build more housing, more progressive housing on the west side and the south loop. And to take all of the Blacks who were in public housing, get the public housing and move them out to the tune of about 200,000. It was like $500 million, if I remember, that Ron said on it would not let be used for public housing.
Does anyone else have a comment before we come back up? Okay. All right. Well, you know, I'm going to ask you when we get on the other side, what are the issues? We know that the corporate media have told us that crime is it. In fact, there's a wonderful Politico article, Kevin, on they said Chicago's messy cost.
60 seconds.
Okay, I'll bring it up to you, and I'm going to pivot to you, Kevin. All right. Okay, yep. And this goes to what we've been talking about, Kevin. And I'll just read a portion of this Politico article, just a few sentences. Okay, thank you.
Santita Jackson Show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about the Chicago mayoral race. Today, you can vote in every ward in the city. You can vote in every ward in the city. Early voting started January 26th, but as of today, you can vote in your ward. Please get out and vote. We need to get those numbers up, everybody, so that you do not let a minority make a majority decision. We've got Kevin Lampe, brilliant political consultant and attorney Erin Connolly. She does the same, and she's also an organizer politically, as is Kevin. And Dwight McKee, brilliant social scientist, and really the academician who's going to be asking questions of us all. He's always holding court, the brilliant political scientist holding class, Dr. Bob Starks. Well, it's always wonderful to see academicians who go into the organizing and activist space because you see things globally. And so you're always asking a lot of questions because you see things from a lot of different perspectives. So, I mean, I tease you lovingly, but, it's true. But, let me start with Kevin on this one. I was reading this article in Politico, Kevin, and I want you to speak to it. And I want everyone. Chicago's messy, this is the headline. Chicago's messy, caustic mayor's contest has Democrats feuding over crime. The party strife has made the Chicago mayor's race a crucible for how high-profile Democrats are threading their messages around policing violence and racial justice. Now, I think this is important. The article opens like this. The homicide rate in this deep blue city doesn't crack the top 10 in the U.S. Let me say that again, everybody. The homicide rate in this deep blue city, Chicago, does not crack the top 10 in the U.S., though you wouldn't know it from the mayor's race. The 8 challengers hoping to topple Democratic Mayor Lori Lightfoot later this month are almost solely focused on the city's violence, hammering on issues such as homicides, carjackings, robberies at every open microphone. And yet we're not even in the top 10 of homicides in the United States. But if you look at the news, you say Chicago, you think murder. I mean, help me, Kevin Lampy. What's going on? Kevin? Ooh.
It says he's there.
Okay. Well, you know what that happens with Kevin sometimes. He goes on mute. Okay. All right, Kevin. There you go.
Yes, I'm sorry about that. So what has happened is the media has an issue. And one of the problems we have in the modern media landscape right now is there's just not enough reporters. And there's plenty of media outlets, but there's just not enough reporters because deep and when they're looking at issues in a thoughtful, smart way, they're rushing to the news with the simplest thing, with it leads. So we have this challenge presented to us where crime is constantly being pushed to people. When the people don't feel safe, doesn't matter what the statistics may be, when people feel that their security is threatened, that makes that issue incredibly important. And then the mandates have very much gone to the easiest thing we're talking about, and that's police. And we see that, particularly in the House campaign, I've been frustrated to watch this. That doggedness of politics that he's doing, where he's trying, and one alderman told me the other day, trying to arrest us out of a problem. Resources of that, but they're not looking at the real reasons behind crime increase. They're not looking at economic development. They're not looking at educational opportunities. And they've gone to the shorthand of just talking crime. I'm going to scare you so much that in order to be safe, you've got to vote for me. And that's what's really kind of, I think, stopped the influence of so many other issues and so many other things that need to be talked about, just aren't being talked about, and they're just being ignored.
Dr. Starks, are you surprised that Chicago's not even in the top 10 of homicides in the United States? And yet, that's all you hear the corporate media tell you, locally and nationally and internationally. Chicago, murder.
Right. No, I agree. It's phenomenal that is pushed in the press, both locally as well as nationally, that Chicago has this enormous homicide problem. And, of course, it is a problem. There's no doubt about that, but it's not as bad as it is portrayed by some in the media. But I want to go back to this whole question of why African American people are leaving the city. I think we have to go all the way back to 1969 with the Riot Commission report, in which one of their major recommendations was that they had to depopulate the inner city, the core areas where African Americans dominated. And of course, the second phase of that whole depopulation strategy was the tearing down of public housing, which, as Dwight stated, just moved hundreds of
thousands of African Americans out of the city of Chicago. And then on top of that, you have gentrification of many areas that were traditionally African American dominated areas in the inner city. So you have a combination of crime being portrayed as great, and it is real, okay?
Yeah.
Then you have the cost of housing. You realize the cost of housing is going up tremendously in this city. And then, of course, the issue of education. I think that those three things combined help to push and many people out of the city. And Dwight, I think Dwight would agree with that. Dwight?
Totally. And on the crime issue, is not is how many crimes are being committed, it's where the crimes are being committed. And what's different now is there are more crimes being committed on the north side or in the white community. And so more aggravated, coverage is more aggravated, and the fear is more aggravated because people who never thought they had to be in touch with a carjacking before is confronted now in their own world with a carjacking or a shooting. There are more shootings down on Michigan Avenue and robberies on Michigan Avenue. And so it's not the quantity of crimes, it's the location of crime. That is a big difference. And so that's why it's become a dominant issue. And that's why they can use that to frighten the white community in such a way is that becomes a preeminent issue for them to have to deal with. And that's the crowd that Dallas is playing to. And in some ways, Willie is playing to.
Yes, absolutely. But the whole issue of gentrification has not been addressed by the people who are running for mayor. And I guess the best example of gentrification on the south side of the city is Woodlawn. I mean, Woodlawn is going to be totally different after the opening of the Obama Center. Because if you look at Woodlawn today, there are hundreds of vacant lots, and the question is, what kind of housing is going on those vacant lots?
Oh, wait, Dr. Starks, it's different right now. I was just at Apostolic Church of God yesterday, and it is, I was like, wait a minute, hold up. I look at the new houses that they're constructing there. I've always lived in a neighborhood that was, my parents' immediate neighborhood was always a very mixed neighborhood, okay? And because it was restricted until a wave of Black folks moved in there in the mid to late 60s, and we were part of that wave. That having been said, Woodlawn is now, I mean, you see white people out walking their dogs like it is not a thing. And then you've got Apostolic Church of God sitting right in the middle of it. I'm not mad about anything. I just, I like mixed income communities, because you're moving families who did the best that they could to stay there, and they've been booted out. Why? Because we're about to get the Obama Center. I mean, it's just something about that just is not right, Dr. Starks.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Well, a similar kind of thing on a lower scale is happening in South Shore, which, of course, as you know, has the golf courses and the country clubs and park and all of those great, beautiful amenities. And people who are in the middle and higher income want to move back to those amenities. They're close to downtown. They have good, Lakeshore Drive and other conveniences. So people with higher income want to live in those areas, and of course, be close to the Obama Center.
Well, I mean, it is a reality. I mean, Aaron, how do we create a bigger city? I mean, Chicago on paper has always been the most segregated big city in the United States. And it just, come on, let's keep it 100, right? So it seems like the segregation is being it's increasing, and it's calcifying into and with all of this campaigning on law and order. I think it could get really ugly. Aaron.
That's a great word, Santita, calcifying, right? And I think it's, you know, I saw it living on the north side of Chicago for many years, and that ramp up of kind of the frenzy that comes into neighborhoods when something happens on your block, right? Mm-hmm. And rightly so. But every neighborhood in Chicago should feel safe, and it should be a big problem in every neighborhood. And we need to look at not just who our mayor is, but who our city council looks like, what their staffers are. Do they believe in collectivism? Do they believe in, I'm only as strong in my city as the weakest neighborhood or the weakest neighborhood school, or who needs the, you know, most help? How are we approaching this? And we have the opportunity this election to put people into the Chicago City Council that have that worldview, that understand that, yes, they're going to represent their ward and their interests, but ultimately, we're all in this together. And we have to share a budget and share streets. And, you know, these neighborhood lines are really invisible. And we're a global city that needs better solutions than we're offered right now. And the city services that we pay a lot for, right? People pay a lot to live in the city of Chicago and are fighting to stay there. As you say, it shouldn't be this hard to get a decent neighborhood school that supports your kid, whether they have special needs or not, and live in a safe area. And I think everybody is fighting for that. The rhetoric that we see that takes advantage of this fear and uncertainty that is permeating in our national news cycle as well, right? So this is an opportunity for folks to take a microcosm of what's happening and expand it to the point that it doesn't have a lot of citations that match necessarily, right? And we're not looking at the whole picture. These are the folks that don't necessarily want to talk about the 10 years of closing mental health clinics and the impact that has had. We're only seeing now a recent flexibility where Chicago residents can seek affordable mental health care. That's a huge issue. So it's not just the simple public safety, law and order, but when we break it down, when folks feel the stress in other ways, it is a more powerful message and resonates more.
You know, Kevin Lampe, if you could construct, and brilliant points, by the way, Attorney Connolly, if you could construct a campaign, I mean, what do you think would be the winning campaign that would lift people in the city? Because you have been very, very forward about your objections to the way Paul Vallis has campaigned. You said these you brought it up here. You said these dog whistle politics are damaging because, you know, people forget, you know, campaigns are short. Governance lasts a while. And then once you leave office, we have to live with that. I mean, we're living with the vestiges of all these people who've left. We're still living with Reaganism 40 years later. You know, so how would you, if you could coach, I mean, how would you want someone to run for office? What would you want them to punch up? What are the issues that you want them to emphasize? What would you want them to say?
So on the strategic tactics side of the equation here, what I counsel my clients and what I think is good for society, because I'm in this because I want to change the world and make it a better place. And let point out problems by offering solutions. Get this right. Mm-hmm. Let's not just say, you know, crime is terrible, crime, you're scared, you should be scared, you know, and say boo all the time. About it. Have some detailed that address the issues, and not just, let's look at it holistically. Let's look at it not just as a policing, let's look at it as a community challenge. Let's look at it as an economic development challenge. Let's look at it as an attitude challenge. If candidates can be there presenting their ideas and look at things not just in simple, more cops in the streets, more cops in the streets. Let's actually look at how can we look at, for instance, responding to police calls? What can we do to make sure that mental health professionals are there to intervene instead of a cop with a gun to intervene as a person with a mind in the background to help de-escalate the situation.
Well, we're hearing from the people now. I mean, I heard a gentleman, he came to me and he was very, 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 very passionate about the fact that he and people he knows do not feel safe on the bus. They do not feel safe on the trains. He said, you've got to get these candidates to talk about that. Then Alicia says they are pushing out the very people who built the west and south sides of Chicago. We are losing our jobs, houses, schools, churches, healthcare services. This gentrification and economic inequality is causing a mass exodus, which goes to, you and I are South Shore people. Dr. Starks. But South Shore is going back to where it was when we got here. Because I'm between South Shore and Hyde Park, because we first came to the University of Chicago. And people move from the University of Chicago to South Shore, or they stay in Hyde Park. It's kind of how it works, right? So talk to me. I mean, because gentrification is something we've not heard a lot about that in this campaign, but that's happening all over the city. And it is south. It is in Roseland, for heaven's sake. When I went to Roseland, I was like, what is going on out here? Then I read Redfin and I see these, I see how they're selling homes and they're getting more and more expensive out there. And in the neighborhood just a little farther north, it's creeping. Chicago's going to be unaffordable for middle class people in a hot second. Increasingly it is. And I don't care what color you are.
Right. Well, I mean, look at the gentrification that's going on in Little Village. I mean, people don't even talk about that. But if you talk to people in Little Village, they are now complaining that their neighborhood is being gentrified because people are moving from the east further west along the corridors, 22nd, 26th, etc., in the village. And it's pricing out people who cannot afford those rents and those mortgages. The same thing is happening along the lakefront in further north. People, are being pushed out by high rents and high mortgages. And on top of that, of course, is taxes. So we have to look at that and understand that if we have a mayor, the mayor has got to address those issues. And of course, when we look at that and ask the mayoral candidates how they feel about it, many of them sort of walk a little bit around it because they don't want to alienate or lose the support of many of the people in those gentrified areas. But it's a reality. It is a reality. And I think it may be the reason why for the last 3 or 4 mayoral elections, we have not had a big turnout on the part of low-income people. That's a question, if you will allow me to question.
Well, my question to add to your question is, are they still in the city? Are they still here? Goodness gracious! But we have about 3.5 minutes left. So your question very quickly, because everyone's going to have about a little under a minute to respond. Dr. Starks.
Okay. My question is, how do we escalate or increase, if you will, the turnout on election day? It's been dismal in the last 2 or 3 elections for mayor. It's been in the 30s.
Well,
how do we get it past the 30s and into the 40%, etc.?
And climbing. I've got a minute for you, Erin Connolly. Literally 1 minute.
Well, I think it's old school organizing, and we see the highest turnouts in some of those areas. When we look at the zip codes and every map of Chicago is the same map of Chicago in many ways. But in certain areas where there are, if you look at the precincts, you look at where folks are really doing that organizing work, there is a jump. And what we do see, and we saw in the last election, is a huge jump in young folks. And I hope that trend continues because they are taking a stake in what's next for our city, and I'm encouraged by that.
Okay, Kevin Lampy, 1 minute.
Is now we no longer have not just an election day, we now have a voting season. Understand that the season is open. Time to get to the polls. Starting today, before as a polling place open and open long hours and open every day until the election. So you cannot use the excuse you don't have time because the polls are open. It's not a short. If you are invested emotionally, economically, intellectually in this your community, in your neighborhood, you've got to get out and make a difference. Your vote really does matter.
Dwight McKee, 1 minute.
Excuse me. I think that the candidates have to be more definitive on, what they're bringing to the table, and more committed to equity in the city. I think the constituencies in the city are so extreme that you have a very wealthy, very secure crowd on one side of town, and a very insecure, very debilitated community on the other side of town. And it's very hard to speak to both those constituencies. I think you really have to define whose side you're going to be on and appeal to that crowd. And we committed to redistributing some of the resources in the city because the city is so dealt with such an inequitable situation that nobody's going to be able to maintain their standard of living at the expense of somebody else like they have in the past. And a mayor has to decide, I'm going to be for these guys or for those guys. So the stakes there, and they fight for that crowd and deliver for that crowd. And like Harold, then you create an excitement because people will feel like you're fighting for them in their interests.
Absolutely. And like Maynard Jackson did in Atlanta, he completely changed he changed Atlanta. He changed the American South. He changed America. He absolutely did that in the heart of Dixie. And sending much love to his family because his first wife, Miss Bonnie, passed away. She taught my parents in college, I found out some years ago. Wow. The former first lady of the great city of Atlanta. Everybody get out and vote. Don't let the minority make a majority decision for you. Get out and vote. Dr. Bob Stark said it. We've got to get our voting above 30%, above 40, above 50. Everybody needs to vote. You are an adult. You don't like other people making decisions for you. You wouldn't want someone pulling the plug on you. Well, when you don't vote, someone's pulling the plug on you without your permission. Okay? Get out and vote. Now you can vote in your ward. Find out where you need to vote and get out there and do it. I love you, everybody. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Devin, thank you for a great show. God bless you, everybody. See you tomorrow. Thank you all so much. You are the best.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'll make a point here. It's interesting. Maybe we can deal with it another time. But find time, no worry about it.
Okay, now Kevin, you're sounding a little fuzzy. I want to make sure that you're heard.
Yes. So when I talk about what we do with campaigns, we spend more time motivating voters and not persuading voters. Mm-hmm. Because there's such low turnout that we spend more time making sure we get the people that are with us to the polls than persuading people to vote for our side.
My father says that. He says, you have to be very, very careful because people are already dispirited. Do not add to that. Speak hope into them. I mean, he is very, very, he says, do not give people cynicism. Don't do that. He said people are already cynical. People already feel overlooked. People feel that they feel disrespected. Don't do that. I mean, you can be with him and he won't say a negative word about anybody, at any time, because he, number one, that's just how he is, but it's not just how he is. That's his philosophy. That's his life philosophy. But he said, when you're trying to inspire people, you gotta, as your wife said, as Kitty Kurth said, look, let's take the win and let's work with that. There's that too, everybody. Is there anything else anyone would like to say? Is there anything that's been left unsaid today? Dr. Starks? Aaron? Dwight? All right. Well, I love you all. It has been great, 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 great. Oh, no, thank you. Thank you. We'll be looking and watching and doing our thing today because this is going to be very, very interesting to see what's going to happen with this election. It's just going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting, but you're the one who's going to make it happen. So please get out and vote. Stanley, you know what to do. Get people out and vote. That's what needs to happen. That's what needs to happen. I love everybody. I'll see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show.